This is Anna. Welcome everyone to our Direct from the Field webinar today. Like I said, my name is Anna Lane. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at Agros International. And I'm so glad you're here today. This is a fun webinar that we dreamed up several months ago, actually. And we were really excited with the opportunity that a friend of Agros was going to go down to our communities who was quite a skilled photographer, and that we were going to be able to get a lot of great photos of the incredible work we're doing that you are making possible. And we wanted to share them with you. So we've had a great turnout. I know we had about 30 people RSVP today, and we will jump in and get started, do a couple intros, and then get into the photos that you've been wanting to see. So, just in case you don't know what I look like because you're just hearing my voice, my name's Anna, and like I said, I do marketing and communications here. And the star of the show today, if he'll allow me to call him that, is Johnny Valencia. You heard him chuckle there. Johnny is what I would call an Agros lifer, and as a quick way of introducing him, I'm going to tell 3 fun stories that I enjoy. The first story is about how Johnny's family got involved in Agros. You may recognize his last name, Valencia. His father was Don Valencia, who was one of Skip Lee's, our founder's best friends, and one of the people that he wanted most desperately to pull into this crazy Agros project of his. And Don resisted, but Skip insisted, and of course, Don ended up on a plane to Guatemala in 1999. He did it supposedly to get Skip off his back, but no surprise, on his way back, he was calling his wife from a payphone in Houston and saying, "This changed my life. And I want to retire from Starbucks, and I want to help Skip make this project come to life." And so Don became Skip's really co-chair in the early Agros days, and his family, of course, was along for the ride. So Johnny traveled down to our communities for the first time when he was 9 years old. Almost fell off a cliff on one of those Rocky Mountain roads that some of you, I'm sure, have experienced, but made it through. Second story about Johnny that I love is how he got into photography, which is relevant to today. And that is a story that involves ninjas. So around the same time that Johnny was experiencing Agros for the first time, he also got assigned a history project in class that asked him to, using any form he wanted, any medium, tell a story of world history. And so he and his friends thought it would be awesome to do a movie, and they did the movie, the classic Mongols Attack Japan. Perhaps not the most culturally sensitive of things, but we all do, things like that when we're 9 years old. But it got him interested, and the rest is history. And the story that brings us to today is that Johnny and I reconnected. He has loved Central America through and through from this early introduction, spent a gap year there after high school. He was actually our Tierra Nueva photographer. And when the opportunity came for him to travel down to Nicaragua this January, we were all absolutely thrilled. So Johnny is formally a photographer and videographer with his own company, MAZAGRAN Photography, where he shoots for such famed names as Macklemore, as well as all sorts of other work. So what I want to do now is actually get to know you. You've heard a little bit about us, but we have a whole room full of Agros supporters, many longtime supporters here. And so I'd love if you could take a second and write your name and the years you've supported Agros and communities that you're associated with, if there's anything specific, into the chat so we know who's in the room. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Also, just a note here, Anna, again, I have everyone muted just logistically so that we're not getting all kinds of feedback loops and chatter here. If you want to say something, feel free, number one, to just write it into chat. You are able to unmute yourself and jump in as well, but just to keep things moving, try to type things into chat. I have my colleague Claudia here who's keeping an eye on chat to see if there are questions or if anything's going wrong. Please let us know there. And so I'll give you just a second more to keep typing in your name, years you've supported Agros, and communities you're associated with in chat, and then we'll move along in just a second here. Okay, thanks everyone for doing that. I don't want to read through everything, but take a look and see who's in the room. We've got, I know, supporters from many different countries we've been in, and people who've been with us for quite a long time. So again, thanks for being here, and I'm excited for you guys to be part of this too. Just to give you an overview of what we're trying to do today, what I want to do today is to take you to Central America over your lunch, just like I said that we would in that email I sent you all. So what my goal is to actually take you on a journey down to Central America with Johnny's camera and his unique perspective as our guide. And so we've assembled some of his favorite photos from the 3 different communities that he visited, along with stories of those people that he met. And we will just take a little journey over our lunch break. The 3 communities that we're going to be introducing you to today, or perhaps reintroducing you to, are La Bendicion, which is our newest community in northern Nicaragua in the Matagalpa region. La Bendicion was just broke ground last year, so it's really exciting to see the early stage development going on there. Then we have Tierra Nueva, which has been around for about 5 years, one of our largest communities, and then Luz del Manana in the southern Nicaragua region of Rivas, which is quite a different geography and some really interesting crops and developments going on down there. Logistically, we're going to try to talk for about 30 minutes after this intro section and leave you guys plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. Again, like I said, please don't hesitate to type in questions if you have them along the way in the chat feature. And if anything's important, we can stop. Otherwise, we will make sure to address them during the Q&A. With that, I want to just speak for a second more before we get into the photos about a really interesting topic that came up throughout Johnny and my preparations for both his trip and for this webinar presentation. And that topic is the idea of relationship in photography. So relationship is a word that we bat around all the time at Agros. And by bat around, I mean we take very seriously. It's really woven into the fabric of what we do. In my mind, as a marketer, it's our unique value proposition. It is what makes Agros special in the world of development. Not only that we do good work, but that we do transformative work, which actually allows people to make connections with people from very different backgrounds and people from different countries and very different, class and socioeconomic statuses that wouldn't otherwise happen. And the relationships that form that are built on a real level playing field and a real sense of trust are what bind people to Agros in the best sense and create these stories of transformation that you hear, I feel like almost every day with our donors. So for Johnny, when we were talking about him going down, he wanted to be really intentional in his photography about the relationships he was creating with the people he was photographing. And before we went down, he used the word integrity, and he was talking about how he wanted to capture photography and I would just love to hear a little bit directly from Johnny about what you were thinking as you went down.
Hey, everybody. So yeah, I've done a lot of photography and traveling, and not all of it necessarily in relation to work with NGOs. And in college, I took a number of classes just about international development work and just ethics of photography. And it's something I've been really interested in, is how can I really create a relationship between myself and the people I'm photographing. And what I really wanted to avoid was any kind of interaction that's more zoo-like than genuine. I don't want to be there capturing images of these people. I want to be able to create circumstances in which we can both step forward into creating a photograph together. And I think there were a number of occasions where I was really successful with that, but there were also opportunities where I realized, like, maybe I took this photo too quickly before I got to know this person. But this right here is Dennis, who is one person that I feel like I was really able to build a relationship with before we started talking, or before I started taking any pictures. And I mean, he was just so comfortable, and I think he felt very honored in having his photo taken. And I asked him if I could take his photo to help Agros support families like his own. And I think he was really excited about that idea.
So for you, Johnny, is there actually something different that you can see in the photo when this is a photo in which you feel like you really were able to establish a relationship with Dennis?
I think there is, especially in this case. Sometimes it's a little less obvious, but in the interactions while I'm taking the photo, it feels a lot more apparent, which ultimately does always translate to the photo. But like, the photos aren't just about the end product. They're also about the experience of the people being photographed. And if Agros is about the people in the communities, it's arguably more important what their experience of creating a photograph is like than what the ultimate photograph is.
So we had one more example of a photo where Johnny thought he really was able to establish a relationship, and it's one of my very favorite photos that he took.
So this is Electario, who I wandered around Tierra Nueva with quite a bit. And at the end of us hanging out, he was showing me his jalapenos, and I asked him to hold them up for me. And I mean, he's just cheesing so big. He's clearly so proud of these jalapenos. And it was just really cool to be able to create this environment in which he was honored and just really respected by having his photo taken, rather than me asking something of him.
One thing that Johnny brought up earlier that I loved was tied into a conversation that we've actually been having as a staff at Agros about the idea that a relationship is mutually beneficial. A relationship is not something in which one party takes and takes and takes and takes. Those are the kind of relationships that you cut off. And so in photography, I just think that's a beautiful lens to take, where you think about the fact that Johnny could come in and want to just capture photos, right, and take, but that he felt, and this is, I'm paraphrasing, but he felt that when he would come up to someone, get to know them a little, and say, can I take your photos so that we can use this photo to help other families like you? People got really excited. And I just love that idea of giving someone who could otherwise feel very powerless the opportunity to be an agent, and to actually give something freely and feel like they are contributing to the betterment of other families, and they absolutely are. So I love seeing that in this photo. And I just wanted to frame up all the photos that you're about to see with that idea, because I think it really permeates what you're about to see, the sense of empowerment that Agros's model creates in individuals who could feel looked down upon by society, and the just real authentic relationships that Johnny creates with people. So let us jump right in. We're going to take you to a village in northern Nicaragua, our newest community, La Bendicion.
So this is La Bendicion. It was founded, the land was purchased in early 2015, and they broke ground in April of last year. Some of these houses had just been finished like a couple weeks before we got there, and it was so cool to see the families all so excited in their new homes. And this is definitely one of the more difficult stages in Agros villages, because they don't have the infrastructure built up yet, but you also see so much hope in the families and really just so much happiness. Like, this might be the first time they've owned a home. And there's a photo coming up of a guy named Onis and just like hanging out in his house that's only been there for a couple months. So yeah, these are some of the kids that were walking down to the lagoon. The last photo was one kid that was just walking the family horse down to the lagoon, which I thought, even as a 25-year-old, like I would be kind of nervous taking a horse all around like this town. And this kid's just like casually taking it for a walk because that's what he does.
So when Johnny was there, he actually got to see an interesting stage of development, you know, the nitty-gritty of building a village, which involves building on top of the big concrete structure that's the primary home where people will sleep, the actual kitchens. And so he met a bunch of people that were in various stages in the kitchen building process.
So this is Dennis, who was 3 days into building his kitchen and would be done in another 3 days. Everyone in the village was taking this opportunity to build their kitchens because they just finished the coffee harvest of the plants that were there before Agros moved in, and the beans harvest wasn't coming up until, it was probably just a couple weeks ago, so sometime in February. And everyone had the same free time as an opportunity to build their kitchen. So it was really cool to see people like walking back and forth between the houses, looking at what their neighbors doing, building their kitchen. And it seems like a great way for this community to get built and for people really to connect with each other. So this is Harold, who I spent a little bit more time with as he built his kitchen. You can see his incredible view out the unbuilt wall behind him. And I mean, it's palm trees and rolling hills and just like the most stunning view you could possibly have from your house. So he was here working on this and looking at these kitchens kind of from afar. They kind of seem like they're not super well built, and maybe the community members don't know how to build a super sturdy kitchen. But then watching him, it's very clear, like he knows what he's doing. He's measuring this. He has his carpentry pencil, and he's really putting everything he can into this. He just doesn't have the right resources to build an incredibly sturdy kitchen. And it was really, really cool for me to see that, to see like he does know what he's doing. And one of the things I was watching him do was he didn't have a single straight nail that he was building his kitchen with. He had to hammer every nail till it was straight. And it just shows like the grit that Agros community members have, that they will take very little and make so much with it, which like is so cool that Agros and those kinds of people are finding each other, because it really takes people that are willing to try and make a lot out of just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, clearly Harold is one of those guys.
So one of my favorite photos is up next, which you heard about before, Onis and Onis.
So yeah, this is Onis and Onis. I hung out with him for a little while. He moved into his house, I think, a month ago. He had just finished it. He heard about Agros working as a day laborer, and I think it was like that same day he called Agros and was like, okay, how do I move my family in here? And he's just like beside himself, so stoked to be in this village and have all these friends around him. And his wife was down at the lagoon doing laundry while he was hanging out with his son, Onis. So this is where all the community members do the laundry. It's right by the lagoon that kid was taking to water his horse at. And they just scoop up water from the stream and clean all their clothes here. And so this is Don Aaron, who we had lunch with, and some of the Agros staff helping him build his stove. And it kind of looks like a oven when it's built, but it's actually a stove. The Agros staff down there has worked a lot on the design of this to create something that is very affordable to build and is really sturdy, doesn't burn the kids if they accidentally touch it. And seeing the detail with which they created this was also so cool, measuring out all the different elements and using the spacers to create it. And this is something that typically in Nicaragua, you can see the entire communities coming out to watch them build it. Typically in Nicaragua, this would be something that's done by the women. And Agros staff really comes in and has the men work on it to kind of shift the gender dynamics a little bit and give the men some sort of feeling of participation in the kitchen and really just sharing of responsibility. And I think that's just one of the cool things that Agros doesn't necessarily try and tell people the way they should be living their lives. They just bring in Agros staff to work on this with him. And it's just like, this is how you do it. This is what life is like. And it's so cool for that kind of relationship to be built rather than a relationship of telling people what to do.
So I just love this story because the nature of a holistic model of work means that it is it is so multifaceted that I, even as the loudspeaker for Agros, don't know all the details of what we do. And so this was just a really cool example of what I feel like is really culturally appropriate work to create a gender equity paradigm within our communities, where a man, by building his stove, gains ownership of it right from the get-go. And so here we have the finished product. And Johnny, tell me how this works.
So there's a flue or lever in the chimney there, and it allows them to control how much airflow there is, and thus how much wood is being burnt. So you can conserve wood with it, or you can change the temperature of what you're cooking. So as much as it looks like a pretty simplistic stove, it's actually like not that different from what you would normally use at home, practically. Cool. And so, yeah, you can see the wood goes in there, and you just set the pots and pans right on top of the holes and cook whatever you got to cook.
I think if you smell this photo really hard, you could actually smell some delicious beans or corn cooking. So with that, we will journey, because we got to keep things moving, onto a community just down the road, which is Tierra Nueva, which some of you may have been to. Tierra Nueva is one of our largest communities. It was the last community we initiated before La Bendicion, so that was in 2011. It consists of two beautiful hillsides with this valley in between, and so the families are actually split between two little housing developments, but they form one community. And Tierra Nueva is mid-development, so you'll see that there's a lot more established here, and families are at different stages, and there's some really wonderful people that Johnny got to meet.
So this is Francisco, who was just waiting for us as we got there, and was so excited to say hi to everybody and just share a little bit of what Agros has helped his life become. And I mean, you can just see from his smile, like he really wanted to be showing, like he's stoked about his life. He's stoked about what opportunities he's gotten here. So I asked him to take me to his coffee fields, and he was showing me the beans, found a couple coffee beans that were left over after harvest, and is clearly just so proud of all of his beautiful coffee.
I love this photo in the line of what we were talking about earlier, in the sense of empowerment. I mean, clearly Francisco is so proud of his life that he is building there, and is clearly giving in this sense, and wants to share and show what he's creating. I'll jump in and just talk about this next photo for a second, because it's one of my favorites too. You see Francisco on the left with an Agros staff person, Nabis, in the center, and another person we're going to meet in a second, Electario, on the right. And I just want to jump in here because I've spent some time with Nabis, and for me, he is the epitome of how incredible our staff are in country. So our staff are all locals, Nicaraguans, Hondurans. They are middle-class folks. You know, they are people who do not have to necessarily choose to go and work with the impoverished members of their countries, but they do. And Navis's story is incredible because he actually used to work for one of the big coffee haciendas, one of the big plantations. He was a technician, he had a good job, and what got to him was that every day he saw the day laborers come in, and he saw how thin they were, and he saw how beat up their hands were, and he saw how little pay they were taking home, and it just wasn't something he wanted to be a part of, and he wanted to help them instead. And so he sought out Agros, and he took a pay cut, and he is such a blessing that's come to us. I mean, you can see that obviously Francisco and Electario trust him, they love him, and he is doing incredible work with our families.
And so I got to talk with Nebius for a little while we were in the village too, and something I hadn't realized was just how much time the Agros staff spends in the villages. Almost every day of Nebius and the rest of the staff down there, almost every day of their work is spent in the communities with these people. So, I mean, he is good friends with Electario and Francisco. It's not like they're just posing for a photo. He sees them probably almost every day, which is so cool how strong of relationships people build. So this is Electario, who is also showing off his coffee plants to me. And he had some cacao plants, and he was also working in the greenhouse, which was really cool to get to see. I think this might be one of, I don't know if it's the only one, but it's one of few communities that has a greenhouse. So here you can see the jalapeno seedlings he's working on, and he picked one up to show me here. But this is a really cool story of how Agros connects communities and creates business just between communities. Because of this greenhouse, well, I'll let you take it from here. You can see on this sign, it says they just plant them in January. The seedlings leave in February, and the destination is San Jose, which is another Agros village.
Yeah, and so this is another thing that I learned through this trip. So when we saw this, Johnny had gotten some of the story, but not the whole thing. I saw San Jose and I saw Produttore Petronilo, and I thought, wow, I know a guy named Petronilo in San Jose. And it turns out that these seedlings were indeed destined for San Jose, the Agros community, which is also just down the road. And so I talked a little bit more to our program staff about this, and it turned into a really cool example of business development and entrepreneurship in our communities. So for one thing, Tierra Nueva has a greenhouse, San Jose doesn't. So this is a way for us to kind of optimize the resources that are available to Agros collectively to benefit both communities. Not only that, though, the idea of selling seedlings over to San Jose was sparked by a young man within Tierra Nueva. His name's Jonathan. His mother, Rosario, runs the kind of community store. You may have met him, some of you. And he thought, gosh, yeah, we could make some money. We only need to grow our own seedlings so many months a year. So the greenhouse is lying dormant in those off times. And moreover, if, say San Jose and Tierra Nueva were both growing peppers, we want to stagger those crops so that we're not flooding the market at the same time. So it works out brilliantly that we can use the Tierra Nueva greenhouse to produce little sprouts that we then sell to San Jose.
And then here's that shot of Eleuterio again showing off his jalapenos. This is Marvin, who told us a little bit about his story. He, like me, is 25, but leads a much more industrious and impressive life than me. I think he said he has 2 kids and a wife. He just recently moved his family into this place and has, I don't know how many acres of coffee plants. And it's just incredible to hear how hardworking and like how much these people commit to, like Agros brings a lot to the table, but these people bring just as much to the table. And it's so cool how empowering that is. So this, I can't remember her name, but this little girl was so cute. She was so smiley, just like looking at us all walking by. And then as soon as I went to take her picture, she got very moody, and her mom and sister were nearby and thought it was hilarious how moody she was. So Sandra, her mom, picked her up and she immediately got a lot more smiley. And I asked if I could take a family picture for them. And Sandra started laughing hysterically because apparently her husband had escaped out the back window of their house to avoid taking a family photo, which I just thought was great.
So last person in Tierra Nueva is Herman here.
So this is Herman. He told us quite a bit of his story, and he has really, just made the most of this opportunity. You can see him standing in his garden, which is more of like a jungle almost. He has a ton of different kinds of plants. He has coffee there and all different kinds of fruit. And he has really worked hard to get his kids the opportunity for great education. He walks, I think, 2 hours back to school and back with his daughters every weekend to bring them to I think it's a preparatory school to give them an opportunity to go into higher education. And Anna, do you want to tell a little bit of his story?
Yeah, well, just one more detail. Oops, let's back up 1 second here. One more detail that I heard is that actually, so it's not only a matter of logistics when you're thinking about helping a family like this get their kids an education. It's also a matter of changing behaviors and priorities, because why would you want to send your kids to school when you can't eat books and there's not enough food to eat tonight? So Agros prioritizes education in the communities, and especially for girls. And so what I heard is that Herman's daughters actually told him, like, look, Dad, we want to get an education. We want to continue going to high school, even though that's not offered in the community. We're going to have to walk a ways. And because it's a way of the walk, we really need your help accompanying us there. I just love the fact that like his daughters, internalized this, like that's the impact, to the extent that they were saying, Dad, we want to go for this. And he was saying, okay, I'll do this. After a long work week, I will walk with you to school and we'll make it happen. So pretty cool closing shot to end Tierra Nueva on. And we will go to our last community now, which is Luz del Manana. Luz is in southern Nicaragua in the Rivas region and is down close to Lake Nicaragua. So Luz is unique in that while it's a much drier climate, they have access to a ton of irrigation. So they are able to grow some crops that are different and sometimes more water dependent. So here you've got papayas, and then there's also plantains growing, and then one crop that Johnny got to know more intimately, which is watermelon.
So this is Tony. We met him and his family here, and they've been in the community for a number of years now and have really established themselves. There's a grouping of 5 houses that are pretty close to Lake Nicaragua that his family lives among, and the matriarch of those families says it's not 5 families anymore, but 1 family. This is his youngest son, Anthony, in their house. And so this next photo is an example of a photo that I didn't take because I wasn't sure why I should be taking a bunch of photos in their house, but they had a TV, which kind of struck me as interesting at the time. But I was like, I really don't feel like this is the right place to be taking a bunch of photos. And in retrospect, realized just how interesting that TV was, and the idea of this kind of being the first opportunity potentially for this family to look beyond what's right in front of them. I mean, I guess television means like television you see far away. And it is like, this is the first time in this family's history to really look past what's immediately in front of them. They actually have some disposable income. And I mean, they live by this beautiful beach. They're growing watermelon. The kids were like some of the happiest kids I've ever seen. And,
but television, it's surprising, right? So, I mean, Johnny and I have talked about this a couple times. Like, he was surprised, like a TV, like, do you really need a TV, right? It's natural to kind of, from an outside perspective, say like, well, is this the thing you should be spending money on? And there has been cases in Luz, to be really transparent, of families that haven't been paying back their landlords, but have been buying motorcycles. And so it's a really interesting kind of ethical space to say, well, on one hand, who are we to say, like, after 45 years of working endlessly and never having it pay off, like, no, you don't get to choose what you spend your money on. You don't get to have that one luxury of a TV. You don't get to show your kids a bigger world. And Johnny said that this Tony's little boys actually want to become doctors because they saw it on TV. And that's a privilege that we just take for granted, right?
And I think the motorcycle is also a great example. At first, it's like, well, why do you need a motorcycle? But then hearing why he bought the motorcycle is because he wanted to be able to sell his watermelons further away in town rather than sell them on the street, because he can make way more money off the watermelon. So it's like, yeah, of course you should be buying a motorcycle if it's really helpful for your business. And so
again, like, coming into real relationship with someone allows you to see their full story and see their full humanity, and not just, at first glance say, oh, this person is being wasteful and vain. But at the same time, kind of to get back to what I was saying earlier, the privilege to choose is absolutely something that this family deserves. They deserve to choose to buy a TV. At the same time, they also deserve to be held up to the level of dignity, which we say, you promised you would pay back a land loan and you need to. But we as Agros need to help them make sure that they have the income generator in their farm to actually have the money to pay off the loan. And so that's actually something we're looking at with our plans for the next couple of years, to make sure that there are actually land loans repayments built into people's crop cycle plans. But let's get back to Tony.
So this is, I don't think this is Tony, but this is one of the fields nearby. There's these huge fields. There's not a ton of rainfall here, but you'll see later they pump water up from the lake into these fields, which is what allows them to grow watermelons and such water-rich crops. So this is Mario and Elsa and their daughter behind them and grandkids between them. They were Tony and his family's neighbors, one of the families of the 5 groups. So all of us together headed down to the beach, and Tony brought a huge watermelon to share with everybody. Here's him and Guillermo walking down with, I can't remember the name of that mountain behind them.
Ometepe, I think?
It might be, yeah, Ometepe behind them. So here you can see just this little engine with a pipe running up to the manzanas, is what they call the plots of land. And so they come out here, start the engine, and it pumps all the water up to their crops.
And the result?
And the result is delicious watermelon, which Anthony and Moises, 2 of the little kids that live right near there, absolutely love. So they were just like running around having the greatest time by this beach. Here I told them a joke I learned in a 6th grade Spanish class. Que hace el pato en el agua? which is what does the duck do in the water? Nada, which means both he swims and nothing. And they thought it was hilarious. So they were just running around eating watermelon, having a great time.
Awesome. So before they left, we got some family photos on the beach, which are fantastic.
Yeah, so this is Tony's entire family, his wife Maria, his oldest son Tony.
Back it up there for a second.
His middle son Ramon, and his youngest son Anthony. And so this is some of the members of the 5 families that live right by the lake there.
Awesome. So that wraps up the most of our photos, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions, but I just want to quickly, before we go on, give you a sense of having seen all these communities and kind of through these individual stories, how they're progressing. I want to zoom out to the bigger picture for a second here. So right now at Agros, we have 6 active communities in Honduras and Nicaragua, plus 1 in Guatemala. And most of them, with the exception of La Bendicion, are between 5 and 8 years into their village building journey. And so as you can see, a lot of these communities are getting to the point where, I mean, the basics of life are really covered now. There are, shelters, there is enough food, there is clean water available. Sorry, we've got a little siren passing here. I'll pause for a second. And they've got crops going and things are going really well. And so our goal when we're thinking about writing plans, which we are actually just wrapping up, plans, 2-year plans for each of these communities, is to bridge the gap between where they are now and where we want them to be in 2 years, which is at a point in which they are prosperous. And I use prosperous specifically, that word, because that's part of what we call our theory of change. Fancy way of saying, if you come in and you're in poverty, what are the steps that we need to take to get you to a place of where you are, a landowner, where you are sustainably generating income, where you are integrated into a bank so that you can actually get capital to invest in a business, where your kids are in school, where all of these things are taken care of to the extent that you will not fall back into poverty again. And so not only do we have big picture plans, which are really all about revving up the economic engines of our communities and getting these crop cycles moving and connected to markets in such a way that families are sure that they're going to have, with a great harvest, that they're going to get a fair price and that they are going to really make some money off of this and develop sustainable relationships with buyers. But also through a series of surveys that we did really extensively in January, a lot of targeted interventions into other little areas that are weak. And so, like I said, still holistic work, but focus on economics and then specific areas in which communities might be struggling in small ways, with the goal of these families, as you can see here, being strong and stable and never falling back into poverty again. So I want to now head us off. We've got 15 minutes left for questions before 1 o'clock. The way that we can do this in a couple of ways here. If you have a question that you want to ask and you want to just type it into chat, I can just go right from there. And so I can see the chat here. If you guys have a question and you want to type it into chat, we can read it off. Or if you want to try unmuting yourself and asking a question, kind of do so slowly to make sure we're not talking over each other, but that would be totally welcome as well. So does anyone have a question to kick things off for Johnny or for me about his experience or some of these photos? Anything here? So I can ask a question. Oh, here we go. We have from Lance. Johnny, how long was your trip?
I think it was a total of 5 days. We spent about a full day in Tierra Nueva and La Bendicion, and then we spent a half day in Luz del Manana, pictured here.
Excellent. Thanks, Lance.
John, I have a question for you.
So here's a question that I'll throw out while you guys are thinking of your own. So Johnny works with a local hip hop artist, Macklemore, and this is quite a well-known artist. If you haven't heard of him, ask someone who is perhaps in their 20s, and they'll know exactly who you're talking about. And it's just a cool, like, wow factor association to have. So, Johnny, how did you get started working there? Working with Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, his collaborator.
Yeah, so I started working with Ryan Lewis back when I was like 15, probably. He was giving me guitar lessons, and I was starting to make my second movie called The Pirate Movie, which we only ever really shot like part of 2 scenes of and never really happened. But we had a bank robbery scene that Ryan made some music for, and I just rediscovered the track he made for it the other day. So after that, we kind of just stayed in touch and worked together on his thesis project. And soon after that, he started making music videos, so we started working on those together.
Awesome. I just love that story. Okay, we have a question from Jim Kanegi. Johnny, what did you experience of the day-to-day work of Agros technicians, such as NABIS? Did you get to spend much time with the technical staff?
I did, NABIS specifically, and there was one other guy in, it was Tierra Nueva, that we sat and talked for about 20 minutes, and I got to hear some of NABIS's story and just got to hear like how committed these people, the staff, are to the communities and how strong their relationships are with them. And we did go into the offices in between a couple of villages, and it was just so cool to see. I mean, like, it's such a bustling place. They're working on so many different projects, and just the balance of relationship to organization that's going on, and how much it's like partially building the infrastructure, but it's also building these relationships and communities.
So there's a question from Molly here. In addition to the greenhouse business, did you see or photograph any small businesses in any other communities, specifically Luz?
In Luz, I did not hear about any small businesses that were going on there. But there was also Jonathan's mother's business. I can't remember what was
Rosario.
Rosario
in Tierra Nueva.
Yeah, she runs a little like general store kind of thing, and so she just sells stuff to everyone in the community and has purchased a solar panel. So now I think people come there to charge their phones, and she rents time on the outlets to people to charge their phones. So I mean, there's definitely a lot of little small business growth starting in these communities as they establish themselves and like continue growing and expanding.
Rosario, I'll chime in. I've actually met her, is quite an impressive woman. Not only has she created this beautiful little shop that really feels like kind of like a central store in any American town. I mean, people just come and hang out, kids get their sodas and cookies, and they do a little bit of redistribution of beans and corn within the communities. She'll buy stuff and other families will buy it back from her. But she has also created, I mean, she saw a need and she created a business around it. It's right out of her house, and has been successful to the extent that she can actually hire laborers to work in her parcel, which I was so impressed by. She can stay back at home working the store and hire other people to do her farm work, which, if that's not a sign of prosperity, hiring people to do the labor you don't want to do, I don't know what is. So we have another question from Jim Kanegi. Thinking in the direction of leisure time as a sign of prosperity, which would we want to promote? What leisure activities, sports, football, or art? Did you see, Johnny, any leisure activities being done within the communities? He mentioned, women's hobbies too, like sewing, maybe?
I didn't see any sewing. I know, from when I was much younger, being in Agros communities in Guatemala, there's a lot of the loom that goes behind your back. I think it's called a hand loom, just a really small one, just creating all the textiles there. But I think that's also more of a small business type thing than a leisure activity per se. And these kids running around on the beach, I know all the families that live right near there just go sit at the beach and enjoy the beautiful view and beautiful sun. But we didn't see too many leisure activities going on. I think most of the people that did have free time when we were in the communities would come and hang around with us, like Francisco. And so, like, socializing was definitely one of them, which Also, yeah, in La Bendicion, while one of the guys was building his kitchen, his brother, who didn't live in the village but had come to visit, and was just like hanging out, chatting with them, building the kitchen together. So just community is definitely one of the leisure activities going on, which I think is so cool to see, that these people, because they know that they're going to be in this one place for a while, they can actually commit to building these long-term relationships with the people that live around them. And there were definitely kids playing football and stuff around, which was also fun to see.
Yeah, I know one example of just kind of the level of prosperity that allows leisure that I saw and remembered was in a visit to Bella Vista, which is a beautiful high hilly community in Honduras. I met a man who has a pet parrot now. And he's built a beautiful home. They've been quite successful with coffee in Bella Vista. And he just has a little green parrot that rides around on his shoulder. And he just actually paid off his land. So it really had this sense of having made it. And that guy, man, he was incredible. He had expedited his land loan repayments by working his own parcel, getting up at like 6 a.m, working his own parcel for a couple hours, then hiring himself out as labor for the majority of the day, then going back and checking on his parcel 6 days a week for like 5 years straight. And was able to generate enough money to pay off his loan and expand on his house. And yeah, he's doing really well. It was an incredible example of someone who really takes advantage of the opportunity that Agros provides. Does anyone else have a question about any of these communities, photos, the process? I realized actually that my speakers were on mute. So if you were trying to talk, I'm not actually sure I would have heard you. I can unmute my speakers, but I think you would need to signal via chat. Otherwise, we're going to get feedback over here. Does anyone have a favorite photo? I would be curious to know, or a favorite story that you heard today. Maybe you don't have chat available to you, but if you could, I'd be curious to know what captivated you guys the most. I would also be curious, since no one's taking the floor and I have the microphone still for a second, to know what else you might be interested in hearing and doing on these webinars. One project that we have cooking is the ability to actually have a webinar that would be direct from the field, in the sense that it would be from Central America, where we would either, in an ideal world, have a live interview with a family, or at least a recorded one that we'd be able to play back for you, because what do you want to know but to hear the stories of actual families and to be connected. Oh, look, we're getting a couple responses here. Zach liked Electaria with his peppers, and Lance loved the first pic of Francisco. Lance, I totally agree. That picture is amazing. I've called Francisco like our flashy old man model in the best way. He's just like an amazing looking human being and really knows how to work it for the camera. Let's see, Molly. My favorite photo was the boys laughing and eating the watermelon. One thing my kids remember well was eating a hot watermelon straight out of the field. Awesome. So you must have taken your kids down to the communities, I imagine, down to Luz. Yeah, there are beautiful fields just full of watermelon, and watermelon's actually a little bit of agricultural wonkiness for you. Watermelon's a great crop for our farmers because you can actually get 3 cycles in per year, which really helps with your cash flow, right? When you are able to get a harvest at 3 different points, you're able to have a little bit more money to pay for the things you need, rather than having it all tied up in the crop. So it's a neat crop that they're able to grow there. And obviously, it's a real crowd pleaser with the kids. All right. Well, if there are no other questions popping up, Jim is mentioning that he was really quite stunned by the bent used nails that were being recovered for use. I agree. It's a really powerful image. And one, I think, too, of just, again, assumptions that you can come in with, that those nails are useless that they're done, you know, that they're to be thrown away, when in fact, like, they can be reclaimed. It just takes some hard work. And if someone's willing to put it in, if they're not having everything handed to them, then they can be reclaimed to create a beautiful home that will shelter a family and allow them to lead a much better life than they were living before. All right, well, we're a couple minutes early, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I did remember to press record this time, thing I did not manage last time, and so this will be available on our website. And if you want to share it with friends or watch it again, it's there. And actually, one more second, since we do have a few more minutes, Neil asked, have you noticed any spillover of Agros techniques into surrounding communities? I don't know if, I don't think Johnny has anything to say on that one. And honestly, I would say that I'm not the expert either on that. One anecdote I could tell you, and I can follow up on this, but an anecdote that I thought was really great is that in La Bendicion, when we started, one thing that we've worked to do is to prioritize getting crops into the ground before we start the hard work of building houses, because building a house is really destabilizing, right? When someone is incredibly impoverished and then we're asking them to spend all their time working on this structure instead of earning money to feed their families, it's a really tough balance to make work. And so you saw that we integrate crop cycles with house building. And I heard a story of one man who was saying that he heard about Agros, he thought it sounded great, he went up and started learning how to plant beans. And his dad the whole time was like, I think it was his father-in-law actually, was like, you're crazy. Don't trust these people. Why are they going to do anything for you? I've heard of many instances in which, you know, someone says they're an NGO and they don't do you any good. You should not trust them. So this man decides to trust us despite his father's advice, his father-in-law's advice, which, I mean, I don't blame his father-in-law either, but is able to grow a bean crop. And we actually have a picture side by side of his bean crop and the bean crop planted in the traditional manner. And he has these beautiful straight rows. There's mounds underneath the seeds so that you can see the seeds are getting all the nutrients, all the fertilizer, all the irrigation. And his crop, I think, produced 3 or 4 times as many beans as he'd ever produced on that much land before. And so he shows his father-in-law at the end, and his father-in-law was absolutely blown away. And his father-in-law, in fact, took to showing off his son-in-law's crops to his friends, because he was like, check this out, guys. Like, my son-in-law really knows how to do this. He's been working with this organization, Agros. And so it's natural word of mouth advertising for us. When it works, it really sells itself. So that's an anecdotal response to your question, Neil, but we could certainly follow up. Okay, at this point, 12:59, I'm going to close us. Thanks again for spending time with us. Send us your feedback, send us your questions, share this video with your friends, and of course, join us at more Direct from the Field webinars. Thanks again for coming, and we will see you again soon. Bye.